Look, I wanted to just give it a little bit of time following the injury to Jamal Murray. I wasn't going to be like, oh, Jamal Murray's injured. What are they going to do? I mean, I don't know why I just said it like that, but you get the point. I just wanted to give it a little bit of time, and we've seen the Nuggets play a G League level team so far without Jamal Murray, and as you'd expect, they're still a very good team, and they still smashed the Houston Rockets. Luckily enough, that isn't the only sample size we've seen of them without Murray this season. There's actually been 8 games in total, including that game, and well, they've fared pretty well, which we'll talk about. But in general, just Nuggets fans, I wouldn't be too concerned about Murray going forward. I mean, Zach LaVine came back even better. Even Dennis Smith Jr. Hold up. Dennis Smith Jr., I know. But apparently he came back and added like 3 or 4 inches on his vertical. And well, that's Dennis Smith Jr., one of the bounciest players of all time. So in terms of athleticism, that just shows coming back from an injury like this, it can still be there. We know Murray is still going to be a shooter. Unfortunately, the season does not stop without Jamal Murray. We have to continue on, and the Nuggets have to look to find ways to still contend. And I think they can still contend. Obviously, they take a huge hit without Murray. No kidding. But some people are getting disrespectful. Oh, they're first round exits now. They're not really going to make any kind of threat, any challenge now. Hold up a second. This is still a very, very good team with a lot of depth. And more importantly, this is a better team overall than what we saw last year. That is more importantly. So maybe they'll be able to make up for the loss of Jamal Murray. Now, before I talk about them doing that, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated. I make content like this close to every single day, and doing so, it's free. It just helps out the video a ton. So that would be greatly appreciated. Now, when you look across the NBA, there are certain players, very, very few players in the league, that when you ask them to do more, they can consistently do more than what they're already doing at an excellent standard, and in turn, not really sacrifice efficiency. And one of those players is Nikola Jokic. He is someone that no matter what you ask him to do, he consistently seems to outdo himself. And I think in the absence of Jamal Murray, he might take his game to another level. He's someone that when he's aggressive, he's at his best. And during the season this year, when the games have been closest, I've talked about this in my MVP talk with Jokic. In the games separated by like 10 or so points, basically the close games, he's averaging over 30 points on the season. Ultimately, when he's required to be aggressive, he's very capable of taking it up a notch. That's why we've seen him take over fourth quarters. We've seen him elevate his performance in the playoffs. I mean, 2 years back when he averaged, 20 points in the regular season and then like 26 in the playoffs. Last year, it was a similar story. And this year, what he's averaging 27 in the regular season, what's he going to do in the playoffs? 35? I wouldn't even put it past him at this point in time because he's genuinely unstoppable. And I will voice one concern. I will say that without Jamal Murray, obviously that threat they have in the pick and roll, one of the best pick and roll duos in the entire NBA, the threat that Murray has as a scorer, all of those things are so great, and particularly great in the playoffs like we saw last year. It was genuinely an unstoppable play to the point where Michael Porter Jr. asked, can you please do something else to get other people involved? Because, I mean, it was working, but yeah, they needed to get other players involved. That's the kind of offense those two can create. Obviously, you lose some of that. You lose some of the spacing, the gravity, the off-ball movement that Jamal Murray has that you're not going to get back with Monte Morris and Will Barton. Those guys are going to help, and I'll talk about that. But you're not going to get back that elite spacing, that elite shooting, and just that elite shot creation that Jamal Murray has. That's what you're going to lack, and maybe that just puts a little bit more pressure on Jokic. The defense can suck into him a little bit more. I don't know why I said it like that, but you get the point, and maybe that makes his job a little bit harder. But if there's one thing we know about Jokic, it doesn't really matter what shots he's taking, he seems to make them. And I will cite the Jokic laws, which I have written down. If thy opposition double, Jokic shall give them trouble. If thy opposition don't, stop Jokic, you won't. Yes, thank you. So effectively, what I said just there is, if you double team Jokic, open shot for a shooter or for a cutter. If you single team him, it's a bucket for Jokic. So that's why he's one of the most unstoppable players in the league. And I can't just say all of this stuff. I can't just say, oh, Jokic is still going to be unstoppable without actually giving you some numbers to say, oh, this is actually proven. And through 29 career games, this is throughout the course of his career, since he was a little baby Jokic, he has averaged 24, 10, and 9 without Jamal Murray in the lineup, shooting 53% from the field and struggling from 3 a bit. But if we're just to look at the 8 games this season, most important, that's what we're looking at this season. How does 27 points, 11 assists, and 10.5 rebounds sound on 60% shooting and 44% from 3? Yeah, those are numbers that Jokic has put up in the 8 games without Jamal Murray. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And the Nuggets happen to have a 5-3 record in those 8 games and 120.7 offensive rating, which would be the best in NBA history. We're not going to go out on a limb and say they are the best offense of all time without Jamal Murray, because we know that's not a fact. But in the short sample size, they have not struggled offensively. And what does this tell us? It tells us a couple of things that we should already know, but it just validates that. It says that the Nuggets are still an elite offense without Murray, and Jokic is still elite. So those are a couple of things that we already knew, but the numbers just help to back that up. I want to talk about what's potentially different with this team from last year. And I think the importance is they have improved. And one of the biggest aspects, probably the biggest aspect in that improvement and the scoring punch, is Michael Porter Jr. And one thing that we know with MPJ is he's going to think he's the best scorer on the court at all times. He just is. That confidence is good to have, particularly now that he's going to be getting first option kind of shots. And something that I really like to see from MPJ over the course of the season is the fact that every single month on the year, he's not only taken more shots and got more opportunity, but he's made it work. His efficiency hasn't wavered. It's been unbelievable. His effective field goal percentage is at 63.4, which for reference is 10% above league average, which for reference is ridiculous. So he's a ridiculously efficient shooter on good volume, which continues to increase. Who's to say he can't push this scoring to 25 points a game? I mean, if there's a couple of areas that you could see him getting some more points, he's currently shooting 54% on the season on pull-up twos, but only taking 1.4 a game. All of a sudden, you double that, you get that over 3, and there are some extra points. Maybe his efficiency goes down a little bit, but you still need that kind of pull-up shooting in the playoffs. He's still going to get his off-ball stuff. He's still going to get his shots off the catch. It doesn't matter with his length, with his size, with his shooting ability. No matter who's in the lineup, if you get him the ball, he can still shoot that thing. But just getting him a few more pull-up shots, getting him a bit more involved in the offense, even more than he has been, and we've seen that recently, he's starting to get more and more shots. That could take his scoring to a bit of a different level, and he could easily average 20, 25 points a game in a playoff series. He could go off for 30. I mean, I'm not going to put those expectations on him, but that's what he's capable of. And that's what we need to look for. We need to look at the capability of the Nuggets. We know it's going to be a lot harder for them, but we're looking at, can they actually do it without Jamal Murray? And if MPJ goes off for 30 points a game in a series, which he could feasibly do, then that definitely goes a long way to them being able to win a couple of series, maybe even make it all the way. But those are the two clear big dogs. They're the two best players, the two best offensive players on the team. And I've talked about how I think those guys can take the next step. There's nothing to suggest to me that those guys aren't going to be able to step up in the absence of Jamal Murray. I've seen nothing to suggest otherwise. Guys that need to, an X factor like a Will Barton, a lot of it rests on him. He's someone that is capable of playing a similar role. He's no Jamal Murray. Don't get it twisted in the slightest, but he can handle the ball. He can create a bit. He can shoot from 3 levels. He makes tough shots. He's capable of going a series and averaging 15 to 16 points a game and shooting 38 to 40% from 3, playing solid defense. He gives you a little bit of everything, something that they missed in the playoffs, which wasn't missed as much because they had Jamal Murray going off for 35 a night and Jokic going off for 35. Now all of a sudden, you need these guys to chip in, and all of a sudden, that Will Barton play that you didn't get last year is going to be more crucial. And if he can give you 15 to 16 points a game, he's a guy that I think if he can stay consistent, that can go a long way to filling that void of Jamal Murray. He is the more similar kind of player in terms of his shot creation and the way he can do a little bit of everything as a guard. Another thing the Nuggets have in favor, is the fact that Monte Morris is one of the best backup point guards in the league. He transitions into a starting spot seamlessly. He's just a very solid player. He's not going to make too many mistakes. He's been one of the best pick and roll players in the entire NBA the last 3 seasons. I mean, all 3 years with the Nuggets, he's been their best pick and roll player. So all of a sudden, you run even more pick and roll plays with him and Jokic in the playoffs. That's still going to work. He is still an unbelievably good pick and roll player, and that is important. You need those offensive sets that you can go to and know are going to get you production when you're slowing down. And Monte Morris, Jokic pick and roll is something that I have a lot of faith in working regardless of the situation. So it's a good thing. They have one of the best backups in the league who comes into the starting lineup, and I have a lot of faith doing a good job even in the playoffs. Now, speaking of backup, you thought I wasn't going to talk about Facundo Campazzo either? Come on. You thought I wasn't going to talk about the man himself, Mr. Campazzo. I mean, you want to talk about pick and roll, his numbers aren't good on the season in terms of his pick and roll play, but he has been a great pick and roll player in Europe. He's a EuroLeague champion, an MVP. Put some respect on this guy's name. Go into the playoffs, you've got some championship experience. He's starting to heat up from beyond the arc. 42% from 3 in his last 15 games. Defensively, he's a pest. He's good. He gets under skins. He gets in passing lanes. He does all of that. He's a playoff level guy. If he shoots the 3 ball, if he gets his pick and roll game a little bit better, then he's going to be an ideal backup point guard. And it's going to be like Monte Morris never left, because he can do similar things. Albeit not as good a scorer, he can do similar things. And just having that transition to have Campazzo now backing up to Morris makes the loss a lot less significant. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go through every single player on the Nuggets roster. You could talk about the PJ Doziers, who could step up. You could talk about the Jermichael Greens, who they didn't have last year, who can make an impact. Obviously, Aaron Gordon needs to be mentioned because he's a big guy defensively. We still need to talk about what they need to do defensively, because the offense we've talked about filling the void of Jamal Murray. I think they can do that defensively. Aaron Gordon is going to be huge. If he can lock up the likes of Kawhi Leonard or do a good job at defending those guys, like we've seen him do so far since he's joined the Nuggets, that could change everything. Because defensively, if they can stay engaged and be an above average defensive team, which they've never really been over the last 10 games, they've been the 10th rated defense on the season. They're around average. Last year, they were around average. If they can be a good defensive team and lock in there, that's where I think the difference is going to be made. And I think Aaron Gordon still is a huge, huge factor for this team. We're going to get lost in all the Jamal Murray talk, and I just did it myself, and talking about the guard play, Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, but we still need to see the defense. The reality is we still need to see the defense, and Gordon is going to be a huge piece of that. Jermichael Green, JaVale McGee as a backup. There's a few things to like about this Nuggets team. They're a significantly better team than last year, and they made the moves necessary. I'll give them my credit. Aaron Gordon has shown he could be that defensive specialist. All those guys I mentioned, Facu, Monte, you name it. This is a team that has depth, and they have the necessary pieces to cover up some of Jamal Murray's production. Defensively, they look better. I'm not giving up on the Nuggets just yet. Is it going to be a lot harder? Yeah, no kidding. Obviously, it's going to be a lot harder. They've taken a huge hit, but they're still there. They're still going to be a threat. That's all I'll say. That's how I'll conclude the video. If you did make it to the end of this video, credit to you. I appreciate that. Have a good day. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.